Hello, I'm Anuradha, a PhD student at the HCI group at EPFL. In this presentation, I will discuss the curation and the evaluation process of a large-scale dialogue dataset we developed to facilitate empathetic response generation. To begin, let's understand what a conversational agent is. A conversational agent is any dialogue system that not only conducts natural language processing, but also responds automatically using human language, either spoken or written. There are mainly two types of conversational agents, task-oriented and open domain. Task-oriented agents mainly help users achieve a specific goal such as delivering an item or reserving a restaurant. In contrast, open domain conversational agents are designed to engage in social chit-chat. They mainly focus on providing the user entertainment and emotional companionship. So what could be a desirable trait that can be expected in an open domain chatbot? It's the ability to converse in a manner that they can understand and acknowledge any implied feelings of the user. That is a skill we commonly refer to as empathetic responding. However, a major problem to embed chatbots with empathetic responding capabilities is the lack of a large-scale emotion and empathy annotated dataset. There are some challenges involved in curating such large-scale emotion annotated datasets. One is the cost of manual annotation, which mainly limits the size of the annotated dataset. And the other is worker fatigue in having to choose one out of many available emotion labels. Because of this, many existing datasets contain only coarse-grained emotion labels. So in order to solve such issues, nowadays there's a rising interest in how these manually annotated datasets can be replaced with automatically annotated data, which we call silver standards. And this mainly motivated us to use a semi-automated approach to curate a large-scale silver standard dataset. What is the importance of annotating dialogues with fine-grained emotions as opposed to coarse-grained emotions? For example, if we get a speaker who is sad and a speaker who is disappointed, those two emotions are pursued and dealt with differently by the listeners, even though both of them are negative emotions. It is also important to note that the listener's response to emotion is not a mere mimicry of that particular emotion. Instead, it could be more neutral and contain specific empathetic response intent. For example, acknowledge or question to know more about the situation. In our previous work, we analyzed the state-of-the-art EmpatheticDialogues dataset by Facebook to formulate a taxonomy of empathetic response intents. And to annotate our dataset, we utilized the most frequently observed 8 empathetic response intents from this study, which we refer to as the plus categories. Those categories are questioning, acknowledging, agreeing, consoling, encouraging, sympathizing, wishing, and suggesting. The novel large-scale emotion and intent annotated dataset we curate in this work is termed EDOS, which stands for Emotional Dialogues in Open Subtitles. That is because we make use of movie and TV subtitles from the Open Subtitles corpus to develop the dialogues in this dataset. Why do we use movie subtitles? One reason is that they are available publicly in abundance, and they are also used extensively in emotion analysis in text in earlier and recent research. One other important reason is that most of the time screenwriters mine everyday discourse to make dialogues in movies appear authentic. And in turn, audiences use language devices in movies to shape their own discourse. This makes movie subtitles pretty much close to everyday discourse. In this table, we compare the size and the annotations in our dataset with other existing state-of-the-art datasets, and it could be clearly seen that EDOS we present here is significantly large in size and consists of more fine-grained emotions as well as empathetic response strategies compared to other existing work. Our data curation pipeline had several stages, namely dialogue curation and preprocessing, automatic emotion annotation and filtering, and data augmentation, and final annotation. I will walk you through each of these steps in the following slides. Here you can see an excerpt of 3 tokenized sentences from the original Open Subtitles corpus. As you can see, the original corpus does not have any explicit dialogue turn-taking structure, nor any indicators where one dialogue ends and the other dialogue begins. Due to these reasons, it is difficult to use this corpus directly to generate dialogues. To overcome the challenge of not having explicit dialogue turns, we developed an SVM-based classifier based on a set of linguistic features which achieved an accuracy close to 76% on turn segmentation. To overcome the challenge of not having indicators where one dialogue ends and the next dialogue begins, we used a heuristic. That is, if the difference between the end time of the previous dialogue turn and the start time of the current dialogue turn is more than 5 seconds, we consider these 2 turns as belonging to 2 different dialogues. The choice of 5 seconds was based on the histogram of time intervals between adjacent subtitles blocks in the Open Subtitles corpus, in which a clear drop in count was observed after 5 seconds. Next, the dialogues went through a series of data filtering steps, resulting in a dialogue corpus containing 4 million dialogues. We call this the cleaned OS dialogues dataset. Next, we applied a sentence-based emotion classifier trained on EmpatheticDialogues to weakly annotate the OS dialogues obtained from the previous step. And we used this to filter the top 1 million most emotional dialogues as indicated by the confidence of the weak labeler to form the EDOS initial dataset. Afterwards, we devised a human computation experiment using Amazon Mechanical Turk to get a set of gold labels for EDOS. But annotating a dialogue turn with one of 41 labels was daunting for a human worker. To mitigate this, we used a semi-automated approach where the workers were presented with the top 3 labels as predicted by a weak labeler and were asked to select one if it really matched with the dialogue context. Only if none of the top 3 labels matched, they were asked to manually enter the correct label. By this way, we were able to obtain close to 9,000 dialogue turns annotated by the human workers, which we refer to as the seed set. To automatically expand our seed set, we used the sentence BERT model proposed by Raymans and Gurevich. Using this, we derived sentence embeddings for the labeled and unlabeled utterances and compared them to find and annotate similar unlabeled utterances from the dataset. Then we used it to train an initial dialogue emotion classifier. And then we used a self-labeling approach and added 4,000 more labels with a confidence of over 0.9. We again used sentence BERT to expand the self-labeled data and retrain the classifier. We call the final dialogue emotion classifier obtained in this manner the strong labeler. It achieved an accuracy close to 65%. We used this classifier to annotate the rest of the dialogue turns in EDOS initial, giving us the final 1 million emotion and intent annotated EDOS dataset having close to 3 million dialogue turns. And here are some example dialogues with annotations taken from EDOS, where we can observe that even for very low confident annotations, the annotation accuracy is quite high. We compare the emotion and intent distributions of EDOS with that of the state-of-the-art EmpatheticDialogues dataset in order to validate its quality. It resulted in a KL divergence score of 0.24, which indicated that there is considerable overlap between the 2 distributions. We also visualized the emotion and intent flow patterns in EmpatheticDialogues and EDOS datasets, and we noticed that important conversational dynamics present in EmpatheticDialogues are also preserved in EDOS. Next, to test the performance of our dataset in some downstream task, we trained a transformer-based encoder-decoder model, pre-trained on OS dialogues and fine-tuned separately on EmpatheticDialogues and EDOS datasets, in order to generate empathetic responses given a dialogue context. The models were tested in both held-out and zero-shot test settings. According to the results, it was observed that the model fine-tuned on EDOS achieves much better performance than the other models in terms of diversity. We believe that it is due to the large size of the dataset containing more diverse empathetic responses than empathetic dialogues. In empathetic dialogues, the listeners tend to make repetitive empathetic statements such as "I'm sorry to hear that," which is reflected on the models trained on it. To conclude, our work curated a large-scale emotional dialogues dataset, EDOS. Compared to existing dialogue datasets, our dataset is significantly large in size and contains more fine-grained emotions and empathetic response intents. Qualitative comparisons between EDOS and the state-of-the-art empathetic dialogues dataset showed that most of the conversational dynamics in empathetic dialogues are observed in EDOS. And experimental results on the downstream task of empathetic response generation show that models fine-tuned on EDOS produce responses that are more diverse. As future work, we plan to utilize this dataset to conduct further research on empathetic response generation and use it to train state-of-the-art dialogue emotion classifiers. With that, I will conclude my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.